Once upon a time, in the little town of Monroe, Louisiana, lived Sheriff Malcolm Cotton Gaines, a man who had everything he needed to live the good life, starting with his badge, a reputation, and a wife who tolerated all his bullshit, particularly his quiet little secret of enjoying the company of a 19-year-old waitress, Mandy Brooks, when he wasn't busy policing the streets. Now, Mandy here was no stranger to manipulation, and boy was Sheriff Gaines good at it. He promised her the world, but never really followed up either. Real classy. The story began to change. Once she got pregnant in April 2009, that's exactly when she realized just how hollow those promises were. The realization hit her hard, real good. Malcolm wasn't her knight in shining armor. He was just a pathetic man with a badge, yet no morals. As expected, the pregnancy only made matters worse. The sheriff's ego was as fragile as his marriage and was suddenly at risk. He didn't want a child from this affair. Oh, the horror. A scandal on top of a scandal? Especially a baby scandal. But poor Cindy Gaines, the long-suffering wife, who for years had suspected her husband's infidelity. Tolerating that for a nan with the emotional range of a brick? Pity, but Cindy was nothing if not patient. Like so many women before her, she tolerated it all just to avoid embarrassment. But let's be very honest, Cindy wasn't stupid. No. She knew exactly what her husband was up to. Wasn't exactly his first time slipping up. Eventually, Cindy discovered his little affair with Mandy and even overheard him discussing the pregnancy. How romantic for Mandy, while Cindy couldn't even bring herself to raise a scene. Dying to know what happens next? Smash that like button and subscribe to stay tuned for the next twist. Then finally came that right moment for Cindy to bring it all out. June 28, 2009. So on this day, their neighbor, Harold Jenkins, was the unlucky soul who happened to unravel the crime scene. It's unclear whether Harold was hoping for a nice, quiet Sunday or if he was just a nosy neighbor. Either way, he found Malcolm's body, called 911, and the detectives sped over to their house. Malcolm was lying there, not moving, and was shot 3 times. One to the head, one to the chest, and one to the most expected of places, the genitals. Ouch. As Detective Maria Tillman took a look at the crime scene, it became clear very fast that the shooting was no random impulsive act of violence. No forced entry, no signs of a break-in. It had to be someone Malcolm knew and trusted. And the genital wound? Oh honey, that wasn't just a bullet. Boy, someone was really mad at him for doing that. Sure, maybe there had been an oops moment in a robbery gone wrong, but that would have been a pretty lackluster crime scene, wouldn't it? Which was not this is. No, this was something more. This was personal. And when the police started getting a better look into Sheriff Malcolm Gaines's life, well, the dirt came up faster than a child caught sneaking candies from the fridge. Ah, Cindy Gaines, the wife who had spent years turning a deaf ear to her husband, making a mockery of their marriage. Cindy was questioned by police, and despite her strongest attempts to stay cool, her nerves were starting to show. She wasn't just living with a man whose emotional depth existed in hell. She had to put up with Malcolm's affairs for years together. When the detectives kept pushing her for the truth, she laid it all out. The suspicions, the lies, and the infidelity. And it's not just that she caught Malcolm in the act with Mandy Brooks, and let's not forget the classic overheard conversation about the baby that made the crime official. Cindy was no idiot. But of course, she's going to deny being involved in her husband's death. She just got done handling his constant betrayal, not to end up in jail though. Now, let's talk about the 19-year-old who'd been roped into the twisted game of Malcolm Gaines's life, Mandy Brooks. Poor Mandy. She thought she had it all planned out, didn't she? She was going to live her best life with the man who promised her the quote, the world. She was going to be financially secure, live in a comfy house, and not have to run around waiting tables, and a trip to the Bahamas was sure on her dream list too, don't you think? Except that, like most promises from men with egos the size of Texas, it was all a load of crap. In fact, the moment Mandy found out she was pregnant, she realized just how deep into this disaster she was. Mandy had started to realize the weight of what she got into, and who could blame her? She got groomed, and now she was carrying the child of a man who could make or break her life with the flick of his wrist. It wasn't long before she felt the suffocating weight of Malcolm's gaslighting. You see, Malcolm wasn't the protector he made himself out to be. No. he was nothing less than a predator in the relationship. He didn't just offer a shoulder to lean on, he threatened to destroy her mother's life if she ever dared tell a soul about his affair with her. That's right, this pathetic waste of a sheriff, he used his position to intimidate Mandy into keeping her mouth shut, all while acting like he was the victim. Classic. But wait, there's more to this story. Mandy didn't exactly get along with the Gaines family. No, she had a bit of history with Malcolm's son, Tyler Gaines. Her messy relationship history sounds like something out of a you-know-what storyline. Mandy and Tyler had dated for a while, but Tyler had a history of violence. Yes, the poor girl had to go through that as well. And when Tyler found out that his father and ex-girlfriend had been playing their own little twisted game of let's make everyone suffer, well, let's just say the man was not so happy. In fact, Tyler's reaction was something straight out of a soap opera. He was raging with humiliation, and this was the kind of betrayal that makes you want to throw things and shout at the heavens too. Tyler's temper was absolutely legendary, and while he was a bit of a ticking time bomb in the emotional department, it didn't take a genius to figure out that he'd have major beef with both Mandy and Malcolm. But as much as he raged and ranted, there was no direct evidence tying him to his father's murder. Was he a suspect? Maybe. But his rage didn't quite line up with any proof at all. There was something off about it all, and the detectives were going nuts with their doubts. So here we are, Cindy, Mandy, and Tyler, all sucked into their whirlwind of emotional baggage and manipulations. But Cindy had had enough. After months of stewing in her anger and resentment, Cindy decided she was done being the tolerant wife. It was time for action. And not just any action. This was going to be the kind of violence that left a mark, quite literally. On June 28, 2009, Cindy Gaines finally snapped. And oh boy, did she snap! They had a whole Texas showdown right in their home. Cindy finally confronted her husband Malcolm for the last time. And what better way to deal with years of pent-up betrayal and heartbreak than, shooting your husband in the groin? That's right, Cindy Gaines aimed right for the most vulnerable part of Malcolm's anatomy. Who knows? She probably had this planned for months. So when she shot him, she made sure she did not miss the part of him that had been making promises to 19-year-old waitresses and ruining his marriage for years. One shot, that's all it took. And Malcolm, in his final moments, probably ended up feeling the weight of every lie he had ever told. To his wife, and even to his mistress, and to everyone. As he collapsed in a heap, blood pouring from his body like a horror movie, Cindy was left standing there, staring down at the man she once loved, but had now come to resent so much. So, there's Cindy Gaines, standing over her husband's body, clutching the gun that ended the whole charade. She wasn't exactly going to win any Wife of the Year awards after this little fiasco. But hey, you don't really need awards when you've just taken matters into your own hands now, do you? Cindy did what a lot of women probably dream about. She took revenge on the man who had spent years emotionally abusing her, gaslighting her, humiliating her with infidelity, and, of course, went on with the final act where knocked up a 19-year-old waitress. The immediate aftermath? I wouldn't say it was much of a victory lap. No. Cindy, ever the planner, decided to chill and stay relaxed. She thought, why not stage a robbery gone wrong? Because that is something that always works in the movies, right? But this wasn't a movie. And Cindy wasn't exactly pulling off a flawless performance either. It didn't take long for the detectives to see right through her amateur attempt at crime scene manipulation. If you're going to fake a robbery, you probably shouldn't use the murder weapon that's registered to your dead husband, right? Just a thought to keep in mind? So, under the weight of her guilty conscience and the overwhelming piles of evidence, Cindy couldn't contain her lies. She confessed. She wasn't proud of what she had done, but she wasn't exactly bawling over it either. No, she had mixed feelings, relief, guilt, anger, and dread all in one tangled mess. And can you blame her for not knowing how to feel? The woman had been abused for years. As detectives slapped the cuffs on her, Cindy might have felt like she was walking into an eternity of regret. But at least she had her so-called reasoning, right? She had been betrayed. She had been humiliated. And if it didn't take murder to get out of a toxic marriage, then what's a girl to do? Her only real crime, in her eyes, was that she had been pushed too far, too many times. Ain't nobody got time for that level of emotional baggage. But this is not a Hollywood movie. It's real life, and whether or not her of a husband deserved a bullet to his organ, Cindy took his life. which by the law is wrong and gone too far. When Cindy went to trial, the courtroom turned into a complete circus. The defense did what they do best, painted her as the ultimate victim. The emotional abuse, the infidelity, the 19-year-old waitress who also apparently had the emotional maturity of a cardboard box. The defense attorney, Lisa Carlo, leaned hard into the cheated-on wife narrative, which we got to say is a move you cannot tackle. She pulled out all the stops, bringing up evidence of Malcolm's affair with Mandy Brooks, complete with disturbing details like condoms and women's underwear being found in the family car. Classy. Carlo even made Cindy appear as a woman who'd been pushed to the absolute brink. Was she a murderer, or was she made to murder? This was the way it was put. On the other side, the prosecution was ready to make Cindy pay for her cold, calculated crime. They argued that this wasn't more of a crime of premeditation than passion. Cindy had caught Malcolm cheating repeatedly. She had confronted him before, and yet, there she was in her living room with a gun in her hand. They described the crime scene in utmost detail. The gunshot wounds, the nature of the brutal attack, and of course, the deeply personal stab to Malcolm's pride. Sure, there was no denying that this was no random act of violence, and that Cindy had been driven to this moment by the weight of years of betrayal. But it wasn't enough to let her get away with it consequence-free. After days of heated arguments in court and a lot of back-and-forth commotion, complete with a courtroom full of Monroe's most bored citizens, the jury finally concluded. Cindy Gaines was found guilty of second-degree murder. And just like that, the woman who once tried to put on a respectable front in her marriage was now looking at a 25-year prison sentence. The community's response? Shocked. Some were more sympathetic about her situation than others who were horrified. But there was no denying that the whole affair left a bitter taste in everyone's mouth. No one could relate the woman they knew with the cold-blooded act she'd committed. But let's face it, there was no happy ending here, no Cinderella story. Cindy was going to prison, and the Gaines family was never going to be the same. Cindy's days in the Louisiana Correctional Institute for Women were far from easy to deal with. Behind bars, she would spend her time reflecting on her choices, probably wishing she'd done a little more finesse when it came to planning the perfect crime. It wasn't all bad, though. Cindy participated in therapy programs, hoping for redemption and praying that someday she could patch up with her children. The relationship with her kids? Well, let's just say it wasn't exactly Mother of the Year material after she murdered their father. But hey, Cindy tried. And in the end, that's all any mother can do, right? Try. Meanwhile, back in the land of the living, life was taking a completely different turn for other people involved in this mess. Tyler Gaines, Malcolm's son, was not exactly handling the fallout from his father's death like a rational human being. This was a man who'd been betrayed by both his father and his ex-girlfriend. So naturally, he'd throw himself into a little bit of anger management and attempt to make something out of his shattered life. To his credit, Tyler worked on his temper issues, went to therapy, and, against all odds, somehow managed to convince Mandy to give him a second chance. I mean, seriously, after all that drama, if that wasn't the definition of a dysfunctional relationship, then what is? Tyler and Mandy, despite the emotional rubble surrounding them, somehow managed to rekindle their relationship. And by 2012, they were engaged. Weird. They even got engaged. Because what says fresh start better than a wedding after your father's affair with your ex-girlfriend resulted in murder? But in their eyes, this was their chance to escape the past. Sure, there was a lot of baggage, but at least they were trying to make something work. And so, in a modest ceremony in a local park, they tied the knot, trying to forget their complicated history and looking forward to the future. Maybe, possibly, whatever. But back to Cindy. The 25 years in prison weren't exactly the sweet, redemptive journey one might expect. Still, Cindy was hopeful. Maybe one day, after enough therapy and spiritual reflection, she could patch up the wreckage of her life. Or maybe she'd just end up bitter, angry, and a little bit more comfortable behind bars. Who knows? The world is full of possibilities. Anyway, this was one of the million stories that prove infidelity can totally ruin your life. This was no ordinary love triangle. This was a toxic sludge of emotional abuse, manipulation, and bad decisions. The tragedy of Malcolm's life, and ultimately his death, reminds us all that sometimes the consequences of our actions are the only things we can't control. And while Cindy Gaines's actions might not have been the right answer to her pain, they were certainly the most dramatic. If nothing else, this case proves one thing: don't mess with people's lives when they're at their breaking point. Because, well, sometimes they just snap. And with that, we've come to the end of this story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe before you leave. Thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed this tale of betrayal and drama, you won't want to miss our other gripping story of a husband who fooled everyone with a twist you'd never expect. It's a must-watch that will keep you on the edge of your seat.